Alright, so today's topic is going to be cell transport. And cell transport is how things move into and out of the cell, not how the cell takes the bus to go downtown. So if you remember from our last talk, the cell membrane is made up of these molecules, and these molecules are called phospholipids. So here, we have these phospholipids. Those phospholipids have a head and a tail to them, two tails to them. They line up in a bilayer line. That means they make two lines or two layers. And you can see that right here as the force shows you. This guy right here is the transport protein. He's going to allow certain molecules into and out of the cell. So this will be the outside of the cell. This will be the inside of the cell. What we're going to be talking about with cell transport is how do things get from the outside of the cell to the inside of the cell, or vice versa. And there's a couple different ways that things can get into and out of our cells. So we're going to go through and explain those all out today. So the two categories that all transport into or out of the cell fall under is either passive transport or active transport. Passive transport is the one that I'm going to talk about first. And what you have to understand to get passive transport is you have to remember what we did in class, where I took the perfume and I sprayed it up at the front of the class. Molecules naturally want to spread out from each other. So they naturally want to go from where they're crowded to actually spreading out from each other. This is called Brownian motion. What happens is the molecules run into each other. It's not like they want to actually spread out because they don't have brains, but they'll run into each other, and that causes them to naturally spread out from one another. Passive transport is that movement or that natural spreading out of molecules. So what we say is in passive transport, the molecules go from high concentration, where they're crowded, to low concentration. Oops, some problems typing there. Oven extraction. So bear with me, I'm new at this. There's a little autocorrect there. It's not from high concentration to low oven extraction. It's high concentration to low concentration. Passive molecules or passive transport is going to be the movement of these molecules from where they're really crowded to spreading out. Since it happens naturally, it doesn't require any energy whatsoever. So passive transport is not going to use any energy. Got a little smarter there typing that one in. Lastly, since passive transport moves molecules naturally from high concentration where they're crowded to low concentration where they're spread out, we say that passive transport moves down a concentration gradient. All that means is that the molecules move naturally. They want to spread out. They go from high concentration to low concentration. So concentration gradient just means that they're moving from high concentration to low concentration. So if we pick up from here, we're going to see is that there's actually three different forms of passive transport. The three different forms are something called simple diffusion, facilitated diffusion, and osmosis. There's not a whole lot of difference between the three of these. They're all forms of passive transport, which means none of them are going to use energy, and that they're all going to involve molecules moving from high concentration to low concentration. The difference is going to come in what types of molecules do these and how they get across the cell membrane. So here we're back at our picture of the cell membrane, and we're going to start off with the first type of passive transport. We're going to call that one diffusion or simple diffusion. So simple diffusion is going to be the first case that we're going to look at. If you look here, we got these little molecules. These molecules, these red molecules here, they are oxygen molecules. And what we know about oxygen is that we know it is a tiny, small molecule. All right? So oxygen is really small. Since it's so small, those molecules are going to be able to go directly through the phospholipid bilayer when they want to move from one end of the cell or the inside of the cell to the outside of the cell or vice versa. What we have to figure out is which way they're going to move though. And how to figure that out, we're going to look and see where's the higher concentration of oxygen molecules right now. Well, if you take a look here, there's a lot of oxygen molecules on the inside of the cell. Not very many on the outside of the cell. They're pretty spread out. So the oxygen molecules are going to move across the cell membrane from the inside to the outside in this case. and they're small enough that they're going to go directly through the phospholipid bilayer. Now, occasionally, one may move from the outside to the inside, but overall, the net movement is going to be in the direction from high to low. At some point, they'll reach what we call equilibrium. Equilibrium is where the movement of them occurs at the same time in and out because they're at equal concentration. All right? But this is simple diffusion. Small molecules moving directly across the cell membrane. So exactly what defines simple diffusion is it's a passive transport, which means this molecule is moving from high concentration to low concentration without using energy. It's going to be small molecules only, and they're going to move directly across the phospholipid bilayer. Directly. All right, so the second type of passive transport is going to be something called facilitated diffusion. Facilitate means to help someone. So if you facilitate me walking down the hall, you're helping me walk down the hall. Why you would need to do that, I don't know. But facilitate means to help. All right, what we've got here is we've got a molecule called glucose. Glucose is a sugar. Glucose is a sugar. And it's a really big molecule. If you tried to take this really big molecule and fit it through the phospholipid bilayer, it would probably end up destroying the phospholipid bilayer. The phospholipid bilayer will not let that glucose through. We know that the phospholipid bilayer is particular about what it lets through. That's called selective permeability. So here, since it won't let glucose through, that glucose has to find another way to get into the cell. Again, since this is passive transport, the molecules are going to want to move from where they're really highly concentrated, which is going to be out here on the outside of the cell, to where they're less concentrated, which in this case is on the inside of the cell. How they're going to get through is they're going to use this little tunnel called the transport protein. So the glucose molecules will land here on the transport protein, and the transport protein seems to recognize the glucose, knows that the cell needs it, so it opens up a little tunnel way for the glucose to actually go into the cell. All right, so from here, glucose starts moving into the cell. A little bit moves back out, but for the most part, it's moving into the cell until they're at equilibrium or equal concentrations on the inside from the outside. All right, so the characteristics of facilitated diffusion here. It's another form of passive transport, just like simple diffusion, which means that it moves molecules from high concentration or being crowded to low concentration or being spread out. And facilitated diffusion specifically does this for big molecules or charged atoms. Those charged atoms, if you remember from physical science, are called ions, right? And how it lets these molecules in, since they can't get through directly through the phospholipid bilayer, they have to use the protein tunnels or the transport proteins to help them get in or out of the cell. All right, our third and final case of osmosis is our third and final case of passive transport is osmosis. And a lot of people are familiar with this one. A lot of people just know that good old movie with, I don't remember who the main character is, but it's called Osmosis Jones. Eddie Murphy, maybe. But that is not the greatest representation of what we're looking at. What osmosis is it's the exact same thing as simple diffusion, except it's when we're talking about water molecules. So again, we would look and we would see where's there a higher concentration of water. The little squares are water. And obviously there's a higher concentration of water. There's more per area inside the cell than there is outside the cell in this case. So in this case, water is going to move across the cell membrane, mostly from the inside to the outside. And as it moves from the inside to the outside, we're going to see the concentration change until it gets to a point where it's about equivalent. And then we'll be at equilibrium point. So osmosis is just dealing with the simple diffusion of water. So osmosis is our third case of passive transport, which means, again, movement of molecules from high concentration to low concentration. But what's different about it is it's the movement of water, and specifically only water. It's what we're going to learn is that it's dependent on the amount of solute that is inside our cell and outside the cell as well. Solute, we're going to learn, is dissolved stuff. I'm going to have a bigger discussion of osmosis in another video, so you can check that out on my YouTube page. And as well, I am going to have a discussion of active transport on another YouTube video too. All right, so to wrap it up and summarize everything, just a reminder that we talked about passive transport in this video. Passive transport is the movement of molecules from high concentration to low concentration. Okay, so they're spreading out. Since it's passive, since that happens naturally, like when you spray perfume, the passive transport does not have to use energy. And then there's three examples of it. There's simple diffusion. Simple diffusion is small molecules moving directly through the cell membrane. There is facilitated diffusion, and that's large molecules, instead of going directly through the cell membrane, they have to go through a transport protein. And then finally, there's the movement of water across the cell membrane from high concentration to low concentration, and that is called osmosis. All right, so that's a nice little summary there for you of what passive transport does. Check out my other video on osmosis in particular, and as well as active transport, that will help you in studying for your upcoming test.